Hi, I'm Bruce, and I'm going to be showing you today how the step-by-step procedure for using the spray equipment here at CU Potters. And the very first thing that you do when you come in here, if you know that you're going to be spraying some of your pieces, is you come back to this area where we keep our air compressor, and I'll explain a few things to you. But what you want to do when you come in is the very first thing you want to check is this valve on the air compressor. This shuts off the bottom of the tank. Right now it is in the closed position, which is what you want. So you put it in the closed position, and then you turn on this switch, which will start the air compressor to run and build up pressure in the air compressor tank. Now, we have two gauges on this air compressor. The one here is the total tank pressure, and when the machine is running, it will run until it reaches the cut-off pressure. So when you start it, it's going to run for a little while until it reaches the maximum pressure, which is right at about 120 pounds, and then the machine will shut off. And when you start using the spray equipment, this pressure will drop, and it'll drop down to a point where the compressor will kick back on to build the pressure up. And then the other gauge is the pressure that's sent from the air compressor to the spray equipment. Now, both of these gauges are something that you do not have to adjust. They're just there for information. They're already pre-adjusted. You do not have to adjust them. So we're gonna turn on the air compressor right now, and the pressure is building up. And when it reaches 120 pounds, it will shut off. Okay, now the air compressor has reached its maximum pressure, which is where it switched off. And you're ready to go ahead and spray in the spray booth. And this whole process will take probably 3 minutes for it to reach its pressure. Okay, now we're in the spray booth and we're getting ready to spray. And there's a set of switches on the wall. The first two are for lights, one for the overhead light and one for the spray booth lights. The next set of switches are timed switches for the fan, which will suck out all the overspray. So you have a 5, a 10, 15, and a 30-minute setting. And the very bottom part is the on and off button, the off button. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna look and we're gonna find the glaze that we're gonna use to spray. All of these bottles in here have a different color glaze, and they've already been pre-screened. All the glazes that we use in our air guns need to be screened so that there aren't any big particles that will clog up the spray units. So we're going to look at one today that I found that was empty, and we're going to screen some glaze so that you know how to do it if the particular color that you're looking for is not available, it's empty. Now when we're getting ready to screen some glaze, we have a Tupperware container in the spray booth that's on the floor that we keep all of our stuff in. And so I'm gonna take that out now. And this is the container for blue celadon, which we're going to screen, and this is a screen for it. And I'm going to pull out the blue celadon. I'm mixing that up. Fill this container up to to where it's about full. And I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to stir it, and that'll force the glaze through the screen. And I'll slowly fill this container with glaze. This might take you a little while to fill a whole container. So when you're doing this, you want to make sure that your large bucket of glaze is completely stirred, and you've stirred all the loose stuff that's on the bottom, completely mixing it up before you start to put it in here. You want to have your glaze, it wants to be completely stirred and in good shape before you put it through this process. Okay, so now we have a container of glaze that we can use in the spray booth that's been screened, and it will go through the spray guns. Now today I picked a bowl out that we're going to spray, and a lot of times when you're doing a bowl, it might be easier to just pour the glaze into the bowl and do the inside of the bowl with the pouring, and then the outside of the bowl can be sprayed. If you're doing large pieces, large platters, large bowls, in that situation you might want to spray the inside of the bowl as well as the outside. But in this situation we're just going to do the outside of the bowl. I find it easier when we're using the spray booth if I take a platter and I put it on the turntable. And the reason I do is because when I get finished spraying, I can just take the platter off and I don't have to touch the bowl itself. So we're going to set the bowl there, and then we're going to talk briefly about safety equipment. And what we want to do and what we want to emphasize is that everybody needs to use a spray mask to filter out any particulates that might be floating in the air. I'm going to show you how to put one of these masks on. We just supply these for all of our members. So you put the bottom rubber band on first, then you put this second rubber band over the top, put this mask on and bend the nose piece down so that it covers up this gap in by your nose, and then you're ready to spray. Now I'm not going to use this today just for the sake of doing this video so that you can hear me properly. So now we're going to hook up the spray gun that we're going to use. We have two things. We have an airbrush, and then we have a larger container for this larger spray gun is for spraying more glaze, and it'll cover a large piece faster. So I'm going to connect my hose to this, and we do this. We have a quick couple on here so that we can disconnect from one thing to the other. So I'm going to pull this couple back, and that releases the airbrush, and now I'm going to hook it up to the larger spray gun. So I pull this back and I push in and then I release. Now we're ready to screw on our glaze. Okay, we are ready to go. So I'm going to turn on the fan. I'm just going to pick the 5-minute. The fan kicks on. We're ready to spray. Now normally, I'm going to spray some out here just to make sure it's working. And it is. What I find the best way to do this is to hold the gun in one area and just turn the turntable. Now, it's better if you hold this spray gun maybe 10 inches away from the piece and not too close so that you don't get any dripping or running. I'm going to give it a second to dry. And then I'm going to do it again. As you can see, I got a little bit close, and it is running just a little bit there. Going to disconnect this spray gun, and I'm going to hook up to the airbrush, which I'm going to be applying the other color of glaze to this bowl. So you pull this back, and when you do this, when you got air pressure on it, you're going to hear a little air escape. So I'm pulling this back, and now it's disconnected. I'm going to hook this one up, so I pull the couple back and I push in and release the coupler. Now it's connected. I'm going to disconnect the spray gun from this bottle so that I can use this, I can put this glaze away, and I'm going to clean out this spray gun. An empty bottle inside the spray booth so that you can put water in this, put it on here, and then that'll clean. You can clean out your spray gun. So I'm going to go in here and get some water. I'm going to clean this off a little bit. Okay. Now we're ready to spray some water through the air gun. Okay. In here, I'll just spray the water into this hole here, which drains down into this bucket. It's just for excess. So I just run some water through there for a little bit. And now this air gun is clean. I'm going to take this off, hang it up there, and I'm going to hook up the airbrush, just like so. Okay. When you're done with the glaze, you want to make sure that you clean off the container before you put it away. Now we're done with the blue Celadon, and we're going to go over here and get the next color, which is teal. So I'm looking for it, and I found teal. So now this has already been pre-screened, so all I have to do is shake it up, and I'm ready to put it in the spray container for the airbrush. Shaking up the glaze, and I'm gonna put the mixture in my little spray container for the airbrush. And I find the easiest way to do this is to pour it in another, this little beaker. And now I'm going to put it in the airbrush container. And this is about the right consistency. It's a little thicker than water. If it's kind of pasty or creamy, it's probably a little too thick. It needs to be a little thicker than water. Okay, now we're ready to go on the airbrush, and it's just a matter of pushing it in like that. It doesn't have to be real hard. You just slide it into this little hole on here. And now the way to hold this is you take your hand and put it on the outside, stick your index finger up here so that you can push the button, and now you're ready to go. I'm going to turn on the fan. Okay, and I'm going to see if it's coming out. Now, because this airbrush puts out a spray pattern that's about 1 inch wide, you got to think in terms of doing it in separate bands. With the larger air gun, when I was spraying this, I was covering just about the entire bowl with the spray pattern that was right here. So I really didn't have to think in terms of bands. But with this, I am thinking about bands. So, and you can see that I'm putting it just on the top rim, and now I'm going to feather it down a little bit, so I'm moving down. Okay. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom and put a little bit of the darker color, the darker teal at the bottom. Just on that foot. Okay. Now I've got a dark band there and a darker band here. Now I'm going to go back up to the top, put some more on. And now I'm going to go to the bottom. Okay, now I have a darker band here, a darker band there, and I'm going to spray a little bit on the inside of the top rim. So I'm going to hold it so that I'm spraying this and I'm turning the turntable. I'm not moving the gun, I'm just moving the turntable. Okay, now I want to get the rim too, so I'm going to hold it up just a little bit and keep turning and get the rim. Okay, so now what I should have when I get finished firing this is I should have a darker layer here, a lighter layer of Celadon in the middle, and a darker layer at the bottom. And I think we're done. When you look at the surface of this, it shouldn't be smooth. It should maybe look like fine sandpaper on the outside of it. So you should see some particles that are kind of built up on the outside. The trickiest part of doing this is knowing how much to put on. When I'm using the airbrush, I think in terms of bottles. And if I was going to do this entire piece with an airbrush, I might use maybe 3 bottles. With the bigger gun, because it puts out so much material and the bottle is really large, I don't think of it in terms of bottles. But with the airbrush, I do. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to clean out this air gun, and we're going to take the container off, and we're going to empty this out in our larger container and then fill this up with water and run some water through the air gun, through the airbrush. So now I've got a bottle of water. I'm adding it to my airbrush. Okay, and I'm going to spray it in this hole here, and that's where all of our excess goes. So now I know that the airbrush is completely cleaned out of glaze, and we're done with that part. Okay, so now we're finished spraying, and we're going to shut off the air compressor and drain the tank. We don't want to leave pressure in this tank anytime more than when we're using it. And also water builds up in the bottom of the tank, so we're going to drain that water off when we shut down. So the first thing we want to do is shut off the electrical switch, the electrical power to it, because if you're trying to drain the air off of this and the electricity is not shut off, it'll want to kick back on. So you're going to shut off the power. Then we're going to go over here to this safety switch, and we're just going to pull it out. Now it's going to make a little bit of noise because the air is escaping. Now the air pressure will drop down to about 50 pounds, and we're going to continue to drop it, and we want to pull this manually until the pressure is about 30 pounds. Okay, so it's pretty close to 30 pounds. And now I'm going to open the valve at the bottom to release the rest of the air, and all the water will flow out of the tank into this container at the bottom. So I'm opening that up. You know, the rest of the air is coming out as well as the water and going into this container. And I'm watching these gauges to make sure that they go to 0. And I don't hear any more air escaping, then I know that everything is drained off of the tank. Both of my gauges are reading 0. Now I'm going to close the valve at the bottom so that it'll be ready to go for the next person. And that's it. Okay. Okay, now I'm getting ready to clean up the spray booth, which is something that we want to do every time we use it. And I'm going to take this off of the turntable and set it aside so that it can dry. And I'll place it over here temporarily. Now I'm going to come back inside the spray booth, and we're going to want to sponge off the entire spray booth itself. So we're going to clean off all of the spray booth, get rid of all the residue. Now, as far as this filter, you don't need to worry about cleaning the entire thing, just the outside surface. So you're going to clean that off. Okay, my sponge is getting pretty dirty, so I'm going to go clean it out and then come back and clean up the rest of the booth. Continuing to clean it off. Clean off the sides. Okay, now if there's any residue on the wall, or where you maybe some sprayed out on the wall, you can clean that off. But you want to make sure that everything is clean when you're done, so that the next person has got a good clean spray booth and all the equipment is ready to go. So that's pretty much it. Shut off the lights, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to sign out, put your name, the date, and that you cleaned up the spray booth. Now, we want to make sure that we take care of all of our utensils that we used. So I'm going to pour out the unused glaze that we used. The unused. Tighten this up, and this is going to go back in the spray booth in a second. Now when you clean these containers out, you want to clean them out in the glaze bucket in the wash area first before you wash them out in the sink. So I'm going to grab these. Okay, here you go. Okay. Okay. All of the utensils that we use for spraying, we want to put in the Tupperware container that goes in the spray booth, and then stick that underneath the spray booth itself. Okay, so now we have the Tupperware container that we put all our utensils in, and these we're gonna stick this Tupperware container back in the spray booth on the floor, and that completes the process, with the exception of maybe just wiping this down here, so we've got a completely clean area for the next person. Okay, that's it. Okay, this part is kind of a troubleshooting section for people if they're having any kind of issues with the spray equipment. Normally, the stuff works pretty good, but if things get clogged up, we can kind of walk you through a few steps that you might want to do first to see if you can get it going. Now, the first thing that I would look at is the consistency of the glaze. If it's too thick, it won't want to spray. Most of the time, you want the consistency to be pretty liquidy, and so that would be the first thing I would look at. Now, the second thing, if you've been spraying for a while with the spray gun, it could get clogged up, and you're going to want to look at where the spray comes out, the orifice here, and if it looks like there's a lot of residue in there, what you can do is you can get a container of water, and you're gonna stick the whole head in the water, and then take a brush, kind of clean out the end of it here, and get all the residue out, and put it in the water, and then run some air through it. And that should clean up the orifice pretty good. Now, the other thing that you can do too, which is quick and easy, is to screw this in and out. When you screw this in, it forces a little pin up through the opening, and it cleans that out, and then you can run it back out. You screw it back out, and when you'll be able to see this right away whether or not this worked when you run some glaze through. And a lot of times I'll do it on my hand. I'll just run it through, and I can see the glaze coming out. And so those are three things that you can do with the airbrush. One is to make sure the consistency of the glaze is right, make sure the orifice is cleaned out, and also running this little cone in and out will clean out that little opening. Now, with the larger spray gun, this adjustment is how much you're allowing to come out. So if this is screwed down too tight, nothing will be allowed to come out. So if I screw this all the way down, and there's nothing coming out. So if you go to spray and there's nothing coming out, the first thing I would do is check this to make sure that it's not too tight. Maybe somebody has tightened it down. So I would open it up a little bit, and now you can see that it's coming out. So this is really just about the only thing that you need to check on this spray gun is this little nozzle here, up and down. And this controls how much you're actually putting on to the piece, is whether if it's screwed all the way out, there's more coming out. If it's screwed all the way down, if it's screwed down, it puts out less. And if you continue to tighten it, it'll shut it off completely. And then the other thing you want to be concerned about is the consistency of the glaze again. You want to make sure it's a liquid, not pasty or soupy. You want it to be kind of liquid.